My name is Esme Crozier. I am 34. On the 9th of March, I opened my father's shop at 6, and the wall safe was standing open. The box inside was empty. The velvet still held the dent where his watch had lain since we buried him. My mother was already inside, at the counter, with her coat buttoned to the throat in a room I keep at 70 degrees for the movements. I reached past her, under the glass lid, for the intake book. A watch that leaves this shop leaves with 2 numbers written down. The one inside the movement and the one inside the case. She brought the lid down on my fingers. Let it go, Esme. It was only a watch. I ran my hand under the tap until the cold got past the knuckles. Then I wrote the date in the book. What took my aim off my mother was one word typed in a box the width of my thumb, on a form I had been licensed to read for 9 years. Welcome back to Porch Stories, where the quiet one in the family turns the paper over and reads what is written on the back. There is a note in this story for $52,830. My mother signed it at her own kitchen table 4 years ago, and I did not know it existed until the week I stopped being able to look her in the face. Subscribe before I take you back. This whole thing turns on one word in one box, and I would like you here when it turns. Then tell me in the comments what your family says when they want you to stop asking. Mine said it was only a watch, in the room where the answer was written down. Let me take you back 4 years, to a hospital corridor with a vending machine in it, and a vest folded over my arm. He died on the 18th of October at 9:17 in the evening. A nurse handed me his vest folded in half like a napkin. The watch was still in the pocket, the chain through the buttonhole. It was running. That is the part nobody prepares you for. A man is finished and the thing in his pocket has not been told. I pulled the crown out and stopped it. Stopping a watch is the one thing my hands know how to do to a moment. I did it in a corridor, with a nurse waiting on the vest. It has said 9/17 ever since. 4 Christmases. My own anniversary, twice. The regulator on the shop wall keeps the real time to about a second a week, and 18 inches from it, in that safe, was a watch that said 9:17. A watch keeps the time it was given, not the time it is told. That was his, not mine. He said it to customers who wanted their grandfather's watch to run to the minute. I have said it to about 400 people since, and did not understand a word of it until the spring I am telling you about. He did the books. That is the hinge everything else swings on. For 12 years I sat at the bench, and he sat at the desk, and it suited us the way a lid suits a jar. He took the money, paid the rent, dealt with the bank. I asked him once whether we were all right. "We are all right, Esme," he said. I went back to a chronograph and did not ask again. So there I am, 30 years old, in a black dress. And my mother says to me, across a card table with a ham on it, "Your father left it clear." 4 words. I have taken the backs off 9,000 watches looking for the one thing that does not belong. My mother said 4 words over a funeral ham, and I did not open anything. I fix watches. It says Crozier and Daughter on the window in gold leaf, on Bick Street, and my father put the ampersand in himself with a sable brush the year I was born. A lamp, a loop screwed into my eye socket, and I take the backs off things. People think it is jewelry work. It is closer to what a man with a stethoscope does if the chest were the size of a quarter. His book is still on the counter, a tall, narrow ledger, green cloth, gone the color of pond water, and every line has 4 things: movement number, case number, date, and the owner's signature in ink. A watch is the only thing a person hands you that keeps working out of their sight, he said. And a man who takes one ought to prove who handed it over. He wrote in a hand like fence wire. I write in his hand. I learned to write in that book before I learned to write anything else. Line 1, page 1, 1979, is his own watch, and it is a watch of 2 families. A horse trailer went over the case the year before, with him in the road after it, and he fitted a spare off a dead watch that same night. His engine, somebody else's body. He wrote both numbers on the one line anyway and signed for it himself, which I did not think was funny until this year. Hold on to that. I am going to need you to see it again. Inside the back of that case are 4 dates scratched with a graver, one for every service. Watchmakers have done it for 200 years, and there is nothing sentimental in it. It is a note to the next person. There is a 5th one now, in a thinner hand. That one is mine. My mother is Esme Crozier. She is 66. School cook for 22 years, 5 foot nothing. And she has the kind of face people call unbothered, right up until they need something from it. We are close the way 2 women are close who have stood at the same sink. Fridays, we had coffee at the bakery across the street, 7 o'clock. Her with the cup, and me with the lid still on mine, because I never drink it before I open. 20-some years of Fridays. I am married to a man named Tobias Denholm, who repairs school buses for the county and has never once asked me what a watch was worth. Tobias's mother is Ottavia Denholm, and you will need her. My mother-in-law is 71 and she buys estates. A license on her wall exactly like mine. A room of period clocks out on the state road. A table every October at the fair where the good money is. She says her sentences all the way to the end and then stops, so you feel like the untidy one. Her place smells of brass polish and money counted twice. Mine smells of clock oil and other people's patience. Now, my mother and 4 small things. They were laid out this plainly for me, and I walked past every one. The first was in July. My mother came into the shop and asked me to write an appraisal on my father's watch. For the insurance, she said. She had never asked me for a piece of paper in her life. I typed it that afternoon and gave her the carbon. 1 gentleman's pocket watch, 16 size, 17 jewels, replacement case number so-and-so, $640. 16 size is how big the works are across. 17 jewels is how many bearings run in them. Anybody can copy that phrase off my paper without ever having had a back-off. $640. That is what a railroad watch in the wrong case is worth. A collector pays for one still wearing the body it was born in. Put a strange case on it, and the number falls through the floor. It was worth $640, and it was worth everything. And those 2 sentences have nothing to do with each other. I gave my mother that carbon. I never asked her one question about why an object that had not left a safe in 4 years suddenly needed a number on it. The second thing was the coat. She stopped taking it off. From about that summer, my mother sat in my shop in a buttoned coat in a room I keep at 70 degrees, and if I said, "Take your coat off," she said, "I am not staying." The third thing was Friday coffee. In September, she said the bakery was too warm. Then, she said her hip. By winter, she did not say anything. She just was not there, and I got used to the cardboard lid on 1 cup instead of 2. The 4th was in her kitchen in January. She was drying a pan, and she said, without turning around, "Esme, what is a hold ticket?" I said, "It is what a pawnbroker gives you. You leave a thing and take money, and the ticket is your right to come back for it." She said, "Somebody at the senior center was asking." And I said, "Well, tell them to read the back of it," and I ate the rest of my toast. We are both licensed dealers, and that word is the whole story. So let me hand it to you the way the state handed it to me. If you buy old gold or a watch across a counter here, you carry a license, and it comes with a chore. Everything you take in, you write up and send to the state. What it is, whose it was, what you gave, and which of 4 boxes you tick. Bought, traded, consignment, or pledge. I have done that form every week for 9 years the way people put out a bin. I never thought of it as something a person could read about her own family. Now let me show you the thing that does not leave my hands tonight. It is called the house call roll. My father called it that, and his father did not have one because his father did not go out. A yard of olive oil cloth gone as soft as flannel, 3 sewn pockets, a bootlace through a brass grommet. It carries his book, and it looks like nothing at all under your arm, which he said was the point. On the flap, in carpenter's pencil, Crozier and daughter, Bick Street. The "and" has nearly gone. It smells of oilcloth and cold pennies, which is the smell of somebody else's house. When a man dies with a drawer full of watches, somebody has to go to the house and say what is in the drawer. Insurance wants it. Probate wants it. Mostly, a widow wants it, because she gets 4 telephone calls in the first month from men who would like to come by and look at things. So I go. I unroll it flat on a kitchen table like a place setting, book at the top, and go through the drawer one piece at a time, saying the numbers out loud as I write them. In November, I did one out past the grain co-op for a woman whose husband had been a lineman. 22 watches in a shoebox and a bread bag. Her name is Gussie Westbrook. She is 81, and she had been my father's customer since 1994. She sat with her hands flat on the table. The fella across the road says they're worth thousands. They were worth about $400, the lot. One, a plain steel thing on a canvas strap, was worth nothing to anybody on earth but her, because it was the one he wore. I told her that, too. That is also what the roll is for. Then I opened all 22 backs and wrote all 44 numbers into the book and gave her the copy. Now, I said, if a man comes to the door, you do not have to know anything. Hand him this and ask him to write down what he takes. She said, and if he won't? Then he is not buying watches, I said. He is buying a widow. Gussie Westbrook laughed like a gate and put her hand over mine. Keep her. She comes back at the end without saying a word. If somebody has ever handed you 4 pieces of a thing they could not say out loud, put it in the comments for me, and subscribe. In about 10 minutes, a woman at a state office reads me one word off a form over the telephone, and it takes my aim off the wrong person entirely. Now the 9th of March. I open at 7. I get there at 6, because the first hour is the only quiet one. The back door was unlocked. My mother has had a key to that door since 1979, and there was never any reason on earth to take it off her. The safe is a wall box behind the bench, painted the same cream as the wall, with a dial you have to lean into. It was standing open about 4 inches, and there she was. My mother was already inside, at the counter, with her coat buttoned to the throat, in a room I keep at 70 degrees for the movements. I said good morning, because that is what my mouth does. Then I went to the safe and reached up and took down the box. It came up wrong in my hand. Everything after this is paperwork. That was not. There is a weight your hand expects, the way your foot expects the last stair, and when it is not there, your body knows before your head. My arm went up too fast, and I stood there in my coat with my keys in my hand. I opened it, velvet, the dent, and the little brass hook where the chain sits. 4 years of a shape, and nothing in the shape, and no 917 in it either. I said, "Where is it?" She said nothing. I said, "Mom, where is Dad's watch?" And she looked at the counter, and she said the sentence you have already heard, and she said it with no more heat in it than a woman reading a bus timetable. Let it go, Esme. It was only a watch. Then I reached past her, under the glass lid of the counter case, for the book, and she brought the lid down on my fingers. It is a hinged lid with a brass edge, and it weighs about 4 pounds, and she did not slam it, which is somehow the part I keep. She let it come down. 2 fingers went numb to the second knuckle. One has a white line across the nail that is still growing out. I ran my hand under the tap. She stood there with her coat buttoned. Neither of us said anything, for as long as it takes water to go cold in an old building. Then she left, and I opened at 7. People imagine that when the floor goes out of a family there is shouting. I fitted a crystal. My hands were shaking, so I put the movement back in the tray and did counterwork instead, and the woman waiting on a stem said, "Cold enough for you?" And I said, "They say it turns Thursday." Here is what I believed by that Friday, and I believed it hard. My mother had taken my father's watch out of my safe and sold it. She had asked me for that appraisal in July so she would know what to ask. The coat and the quitting of coffee were what a woman looks like when she is ashamed of something she has already decided to do. And under all of it, she never liked that I got the shop. I had had that stone in my chest 4 years. He left the bench and the book and the name on the window to me, and left her the house and the insurance. Tidy and fair and nobody in that family ever said a word about it, and there is nothing quieter than a thing nobody says a word about. I sat with it 8 days. On the Tuesday, I drove to the district station on Cortlandt Street and told a detective my mother had taken a pocket watch out of my shop safe. I gave him her name. I spelled it. I watched him write it in the box that says the name. I did not do that because I am a hard woman. I did it because I am a woman who writes down 2 numbers for other people's watches so that nobody can ever tell a widow a story, and in 9,000 cases I have never once been wrong to write them down. I also did it because I was 34, and I wanted somebody official to say out loud that I had been robbed, since nobody in my family was ever going to. Both are true. If only the first one were true, this would be a shorter story, and I would come out of it better. The detective was kind and slow, and wrote about 6 lines. He asked me for the numbers. I gave him the movement number and the case number off page 1, and he read them both back, and he said, "Most people can't tell me anything past, 'it was gold.'" Then he asked whether I wanted him to make the call, or whether I wanted to. I said, "Make it." He called my mother that afternoon, and my mother told him she had sold it and gave him the name of the buyer, and the name of the buyer was Ottavia Denholm, my husband's mother. I sat in the shop with the receiver at my ear and my eyes on the regulator, and I did not hear the next thing the detective said. Because you understand what that is. That is not losing a watch. That is my mother taking my father off his own chest and carrying him out the state road to a woman who sits across a table from me every Christmas. I drove out there the next morning. 9:30, 40 clocks all running a few seconds apart, which sounds like rain if you are not used to it. My mother-in-law came out from the back with her reading glasses up in her hair. She did not look surprised. She has never once looked surprised to see anybody. I said, "You have my father's watch." She said, "I have a watch I bought." I said, "From my mother." And my husband's mother said the sentence I have carried since. She said it flat, the way you give directions. She signed it. I only kept the paper. Then she went into the back and came out with a folder and slid one sheet across the glass, face up, turned the right way round for me, which dealers do and is no courtesy. A bill of sale, 1 gentleman's pocket watch, 16 size, 17 jewels, replacement case, case number so-and-so, sold by Esme Crozier, $640. Signed at the bottom in my mother's hand, which I have known since it was on the front of my school notebooks. And a date in the corner. The 17th of March. The 17th of March was yesterday. The afternoon, a detective on Cortlandt Street picked up a telephone. I did not see it. I stood in a room full of clocks, looking at my mother's signature and the number I had typed in July, and never looked at the date. I gave it back, I said. "That's her hand." She said, "Yes." I said, "She had no right to sell it. It was in my safe." And she took her glasses down out of her hair and said, "Your mother came to me because a bank would not. You might ask yourself why she needed one." I put that down as cruelty. Filed it, drove home, ate nothing. It was not cruelty. It was the only true sentence anybody said to me that month, and it came from the woman I am about to spend 20 minutes telling you about. That night I untied the house call roll on my own bench, which I had never once done. It had been into 40-odd kitchens and never been opened in this shop. It is the going out thing, the way a coat is. A woman does not sit in her own front room in her coat. I unrolled it flat. Book at the top. Forms in the middle pocket. Pencil, loop, folding rule. Then I put the lamp down low, the way you do when the work is small, and opened the book to page 1. 1979. His hand, 30 years younger, pressing harder. Movement number. Case number. Date. And his own signature in the owner column, because he made himself sign for his own watch on the first line of his own book, alone in a shop he had been in 3 weeks. I put my thumb on it, coarse paper, and you can feel where the nib went through. She had not given me a copy of the bill of sale, so I wrote out from memory what had been on it. Then I looked at what I had written, and something at the back of my neck went cold. The bill of sale had 1 number on it. The case number. Not the movement number. Just the case. To you, that is nothing. To me, that is a man selling you a horse and describing the trailer. Here is where the two numbers start to matter. The factory ships them married, one for the engine and one for the body it came in. Crush a case, fit another, and the two are strangers from that hour on. My father's engine has worn a dead man's case since 1978, so the case number on that bill of sale belongs, in a factory book somewhere, to a watch he never owned. A dealer who takes a pocket watch across a counter pops the back and reads the works, because the works are the watch. 40 years in this trade, and you read the movement first, and the case only for its metal. My mother-in-law has been licensed since before I was born. So why does her paper describe a body and not an engine? I did not sleep. At some point, Tobias put his hand flat on my back without waking up, which is worth more in a marriage than most of what gets said out loud. In the morning, I called the factory. The maker went out of business in the 50s, but the archive did not. It sits in a museum basement 2 states over. A woman answers on Thursdays, and for $9, they look up a number and tell you what left the building. I gave her the case number. She was gone about 4 minutes. I could hear a drawer. Then she said, "Ma'am, that case number went out of here in 1978 in a complete watch, and I have got its movement number right here, and it is not the one you just read me." "They were never the same watch," I said. "Could it have been recased?" She laughed, not unkindly. "Honey," she said, "that's the only thing that ever happens." I stood in my own shop with the telephone in my hand and my ears going hot, and I thought, she has sold my father's watch and papered it as a different one. That was the first honest piece of evidence I ever had, and I read it exactly backwards. Here is what I had actually proved. It took 9 more days to see it. That bill of sale describes a case number that belongs, in the factory's own book, to a watch my father never owned. So whoever wrote it was not standing over the watch when they wrote it. They were copying off a piece of paper. And there is one piece of paper in this world that describes my father's watch by its case number and never mentions the movement at all. I typed it in July on shop letterhead and handed my mother the carbon. An appraisal describes what an adjuster can see without a screwdriver. Case, metal, marks, size. That is how I was taught. I wrote the only sentence anybody needed to fake a sale of my father's watch, and I wrote it because my mother asked me in a nice voice on a warm afternoon. Sit with that a second, if you have ever handed somebody the thing they used. I did not know it yet. I only knew the numbers did not match, so I kept going. I went at my mother's signature next, and I am not proud of the reason. I wanted it forged. I wanted 8 days of being the woman who reported her own mother to end with a stranger's hand on that page. The shop has a drawer of guarantee cards going back to 1984. You sign, I sign, you keep the top copy, and the shop keeps the carbon. My mother has been in and out of that drawer 20 years. Her own watch, her sister's clock, a kitchen timer she once made my father fix on principle. I laid 19 of her signatures out on the oilcloth, in date order under the bench lamp, and put the loop in and went down the line. 94, 99, 2003, 2011. Last spring. There is a thing her O does. It closes late, so a little tail comes off the left where the pen swings back. It has done that since before I could read. It is on every card. It was on the bill of sale. My mother signed it. I turned the lamp off and sat in the dark of my own shop with 19 cards in front of me. That was the lowest hour of the spring, and it was not even the true part of the story. Let it go, Esme. It was only a watch. I had that sentence in my ears all 8 days, and every time, it meant she did not care what she had taken. The next morning, Gussie Westbrook came in with her own card. She had kept it in her purse since November, folded in half, because I had told her to. She said, "Is this the kind of thing you meant?" I said, "Yes, Mrs. Westbrook. That is exactly the kind of thing I meant." She said, "Well, I've got 4 more at home if you want the set," and I laughed for the first time in 9 days. She patted the counter twice and left. She has no idea she did that. Now let me give my mother a paragraph, because she has one coming, and because a story with only one honest person in it is a story somebody has arranged. My mother was raised over a feed store by a woman who kept the money in a coffee tin and moved the tin, third of 5. She has told me 2 things about being a child, and one of them is about a coat. She married a man who fixed watches. She cooked in a school kitchen 22 years for the insurance. At 62, she buried him. And I sat in the dark that night and thought, a woman who grew up moving a coffee tin looks at $640 in a safe and does not see a dead man's chest. She sees $640. I could hear my grandmother's kitchen in every bit of that. I thought I was being generous. I thought I was being the bigger one. And then I went to the police station on the Tuesday anyway, because a reason is not a receipt, and I would do that part again. Keep that paragraph. I hand it back to you in about 10 minutes with a different name in it. Subscribe if you are staying for the counter, because the paper that ends this is not one I found and not one I made. My mother-in-law filed it herself, with her own licensee number on it, back when she was certain nobody who could read it would ever have a reason to ask. What I finally did, on the second Wednesday in April, was not clever. It was a chore. When a licensed dealer loses an item off the premises, that dealer files a report. My own paperwork, a nuisance, and I had put it off a month because filing it meant writing my mother's name into a second box on a second form. So I called the state licensing office to ask which line the thing went on. The clerk who answers that telephone is a woman named Esme, and she has answered it a long time. She has the voice of somebody looking at 2 screens. I said I needed to report an item gone off my premises, and did not know which line. She said, "Give me the serial and I'll tell you what I'm looking at." I gave her the movement number, my father's engine, 6 figures and a letter. There was a pause of about 4 seconds, a long time on a telephone. Then Iantha said, "Ma'am, that's already in the file." I said, "I know. She filed a bill of sale last month." And Ianthe said, "No, ma'am. This one came in a year ago. April." I said April. She said, "April, filed by a licensee out on the state road, inside her 10 days, nothing wrong with it." And I said, "What does it say she did with it?" And Ianthe read me the box. Pledge, 1 word, 5 letters, typed into a box on a state form the width of my thumb. I asked for a certified copy. It came on the Saturday in a windowed envelope, and I have it here, a manual typewriter, which tells you my mother-in-law fills these out herself in the back room. The P of pledge is struck harder than everything round it, the way a first letter is when a hand is still finding the pressure. Let me say what that word means, because I am not having you do work tonight that I can do. There are 4 boxes. If she had ticked bought, my mother sold my father's watch, and this is a story about a woman who sold a dead man's watch. She ticked pledge. Pledge means my mother did not sell it. Pledge means she handed it over and took money and took a ticket, and the watch was sitting there against a debt, waiting to be come back for. Those are 2 different women. Let it go, Esme. It was only a watch. Said by a thief, that sentence is a shrug. Said by a woman with a hold ticket in her coat, it is the shortest way she could think of to keep me out of the courthouse. A watch keeps the time it was given, not the time it is told. One more thing about that form, and then I will let it go. The report is dated the previous April. The bill of sale on her glass counter is dated the 17th of March, 11 months apart. She wrote the loan down when she thought it was between her and the state. She wrote the sale 11 months later, in the hours after a detective telephoned her. I sat on the floor with my back against the bench and the certified copy in both hands, and the first feeling was not relief. It was that the box in the safe had been empty since April, and I had not opened it. 11 months. My father's watch was out of my building for 11 months, and I did not know, because I am a woman who opens other people's boxes for a living, and had not opened the one in my own wall since the anniversary. And it stood July back up. A dealer holding a thing against a loan wants a current number on it, And one person in this county writes that number for a railroad watch. My mother-in-law sent my mother to me for it. $640 was not enough to keep anybody quiet. In September, my mother's name went onto the Friday list. The second feeling came about a minute later. It was my mother's voice in a kitchen in January. Esme, what is a hold ticket? She had one. She was asking me what she was holding. She asked the only person in the county who could have told her. And I told her. And I ate my toast. Now the money. Where this stops being about an object. The state form gave me a licensee number and a date. It did not give me a debt. For the debt, I went 3 blocks the other way, to the district court. Limestone, a counter on the ground floor, a woman behind it, 29 years. Her name is Hildred Vandergrift, and she is the collections clerk. She wears a rubber thimble on her right index finger all day, and she wears it out to the parking lot, and I do not think she knows it is on. I said I wanted to look at the docket for a name. She said, public. Anybody can. Counties or districts. I said I did not know the difference. She said, then let's do both, and came out from behind the counter. My mother's name was on the list. A note. $52,830. Holder, my husband's mother. Signed 4 years ago in November, 3 weeks after my father was buried. Docketed the following spring. Hildred pulled the file, turned it round for me, and left me alone with it, which I did not know a stranger could give you. $52,830. Typed hard enough into the note that I could feel the figure from the back of the page. I ran my thumb over the back of that sheet twice. Stapled under it was the reason. A payoff quote from the bank on the corner, dated the 9th of November, addressed to the estate. The shop's line of credit, which my father used for stock the way every dealer does, and which the bank called when the borrower died, because the paper says they may, $52,830. Nobody made that number up. That is principal and interest to the day, and a fee for the letter. And it is ugly and precise for the same reason a hospital bill is. Your father left it clear. My mother made that sentence true. At a kitchen table, 3 weeks after the funeral, with a black dress still over a chair somewhere in that house. Then she came to a card table with a ham on it and said 4 words to her daughter, so her daughter could go on being a woman with a bench. I have not been able to open that safe since without hearing it. There were payment slips in the file. $40. $40. $40. Sometimes $60. Always the first week of a month. Because my mother's check comes on the 3rd. $40 a month for 3.5 years is $1,680. $52,830 owed. $1,680 paid. I will not make you sit with that. It is not a payment. It is the price of not being called first on a Friday. And she had been buying it out of a school cook's pension for 3.5 years. She was going to die owing it, and anybody at that counter could see it. She knew that when she signed, and signed anyway, because the alternative was telling me. Hildred Vandergrift came back with 2 more pages, and saw my face, and did not do the thing people do. She said, "Do you want to know what this actually does, or do you want to be left alone with it?" I said, "Tell me what it does." And she put the thimble finger down on the docket line and she said, "A note doesn't have to be true to work, ma'am, docketed Friday. It reaches her rent, her account, her furniture." I said, "Her furniture," she said. "Her furniture. It is not a threat. It is a schedule. Fridays." My mother quit Friday coffee in September. The district court calls the collections list on Fridays at 9. If you are on it and you do not come, that is noted. If you do come, you sit on a bench in a corridor with about 30 other people and you are called by your last name. She had been sitting on that bench 3 blocks from my shop while I sat at the bakery with a cardboard lid on a cup I had bought for her. That is the moment, if you want to know. Not the safe, not the word on the form, a cup with a lid on it. I went and saw Hazel, who has lived across the hall from my mother for 6 years, and asked her straight out how long my mother had been going to the courthouse on Fridays. Hazel said, "Oh, Honey, a good while. She told me it was jury duty. Then Hazel said, and she quit taking her coat off. Did you notice that? I said, I noticed. Hazel said, my mother did that in 1971. It means she thinks she is about to be asked to leave. So let me hand you back that paragraph now, the one I asked you to keep. My mother was already inside, at the counter, with her coat buttoned to the throat in a room I keep at 70 degrees for the movements. I have given you that sentence twice, and both times I meant she was cold to me. A woman in a buttoned coat, in a warm room, is a woman making a point. That is what I thought, since July. She was not making a point. She was cold. My mother stood outside a locked arcade on the state road at 5 a.m. That door does not open until 10. She had gone to buy her husband's watch back with what she had before her daughter noticed it was gone, and she stood in the dark long enough to be that cold. Then she drove to my shop to be in the room when I opened the safe. She could not stand me finding it alone, and could not stand telling me why. And a woman does not take her coat off in a room where somebody might ask her to sit down. Let it go, Esme. It was only a watch. She was not telling me the watch did not matter. She was telling me it was the cheapest thing in that safe next to what asking was going to cost us both, and she was the only one who knew the price. I wrote my mother a paragraph of fairness in the dark of my own shop, and I was pleased with myself for it, and I put the wrong crime in it. I gave her a childhood over a feed store and used it to explain why a woman would sell a dead man's watch. She never sold anything. What it explains is why a woman signs $52,830 rather than say the word out loud to her daughter. Not the same paragraph. Mine had somebody else's name in it. That is what it costs to decide early. Everything after it arrives already sorted. On the Thursday, I drove back to Cortlandt Street. On television, somebody says, "Never mind," and everyone smiles. What happens is you sit in the same plastic chair and tell a working man that the statement you gave him is wrong. He does not get angry, he gets tired. He takes out the form and says, "All right, walk me through it." Then he said the thing that stays with me. "So the complaint's against the buyer then," I said. "I don't know yet what the complaint is," he said. "Well, when you know, come back. Your mother's name comes off either way." He crossed it through with one line and initialed it. A man with a pen took my mother out of a box in about a second and a half, and it had taken me 5 weeks to put her in it. Then I went home and told my husband what his mother had done. Tobias turned his cup around twice and said, "She's my mother, Esme." I said, "I know," he said. "She'd have had a reason." I said, "I know that too. 9 years, and I have never heard him speak badly of her, and I did not need him to start then. He drove me out to the county seat twice after that and sat in the truck. That is what he had. I have stopped grading people on the part they cannot do. The block was worse. Theobald Wainwright is the engraver 2 doors up. He has sharpened my gravers since my apprenticeship. He came to my father's funeral in a suit older than me, and he has stood in my doorway most mornings since I got the key, with a cup in his hand. He came in on a Monday and stood at the counter without sitting down. "Settle it Friday, Esme. Your mother's old, and the block talks." I said, "Settle what?" "Theo." He said, "Whatever it is, give the woman her money, or give her the watch back, or give her something. Your mother has been on that Friday list since September. There's a detective in it now, and old Mrs. Denholm has a stall at the October Fair, and half this street sells through it. Half that street sells through it. He has known me since I was 15, and he told me to settle because of October. He was not being wicked. He was a man with a rent, and it is the ones with rents who fold first. I have thought about that more than about anything my mother-in-law ever said to me. He still sharpens my gravers. We do not stand in the doorway in the mornings anymore. Now, this is where I could have finished her, and I will walk you up to it so you can feel how easy it was. My mother-in-law sells period clocks. Period means the works and the case and the dial all left the factory together. Over 2 visits. 1, a quote she asked me for years ago. 1, That spring I had photographed the numbers on the movements and cases of the clocks along her north wall. 12 of them do not match. That is not a crime. Half the good clocks in this country are married up out of 2 or 3 dead ones, and the trade knows it. But a fair with a vetting committee is not the trade. It is a room full of people who paid at the door, and the committee that hands out tables wants one word: original. One letter with 12 photographs stapled to it empties that arcade by Saturday. I wrote it. That goes on the record, because I have no interest in being the woman who never thought of it. I wrote it on a Sunday afternoon and printed the photographs and put the lot in a manila envelope and set it on the corner of the bench and looked at it while I did a staff. I did not send it, and here is exactly why. One letter to the fair's vetting committee empties her arcade by Saturday. That is what she did to my mother, and I won't call it evidence when it's mine. That is the whole machine, do you see? A woman with paper on another woman. Send it and I have not broken the machine. I have bought it, and the only thing that changed is the driver. The 12 photographs are in that envelope in the second drawer of my bench. They are not evidence, and never were. They are 12 pictures of the insides of clocks, and the only thing they were ever going to buy is a Saturday. Now my mother-in-law gets her paragraph, and this time I aim it at the right person. She was 19 when men carried the stock out of her mother's shop on a Tuesday morning. Her mother sold sewing machines and mended them, on handshakes and on settle up at harvest, and kept a receipt book with almost nothing in it, because writing it down in front of a neighbor was rude. The whole county knew she was owed. Not one page said so. Ottavia Denholm stood on that sidewalk at 19, beside her own mother, who was holding an empty receipt book. She told that story at her own table at Christmas in front of 9 people, in the flat voice she tells everything in, and I have thought about that girl on the sidewalk more this year than about myself. Here is what she did with it. She became a woman who writes everything down. Then she went and found women who do not know how to ask for a copy. She lent my mother $52,830 at a kitchen table, 3 weeks after a funeral. No lawyer there, and no copy left behind. When the payments got small, she took the one object in that house a woman would rather die than explain. She wrote it honestly as a pledge in April, when only the state was watching, and as a sale in March, when a badge was. A sidewalk in 1972 put something in that woman's hands. It did not tell her whose hands to put it in. I have never been able to hate her cleanly, and I have stopped trying. Clean is not the point. The schedule is the point. She came to my shop on the last Tuesday in April and stood on the customer side of my counter with both hands on her handbag. She said, "Tobias tells me you've been to the courthouse." I said, "I've been to the courthouse, and I've been to the state, and I have your April report, and it says pledge." My husband's mother did not blink, and did not raise her voice. "You put your mother's name in a police report, over a watch." Hear that the way I heard it, standing in my own shop, in my apron, with my hand flat on the glass. Because it is true, I did that. It is on a form on Cortlandt Street with a line through it and a working man's initials beside it, and there is no paper in this county that takes it back off me. I did not answer her. I have gone over it 100 times and still do not have the sentence, and I have decided there is not one. She let it sit about 4 seconds, which is a long time in a quiet room. Then she said the other thing, and this one she had ready. She signed it. I only kept the paper, and that is when I knew how it had to end, and it was not going to be me who did it. Because I had one chore left. It was mine, it was boring, and it was the whole thing. I filed my report, the one I had put off a month. An item off my premises, described properly, both numbers, with a photocopy of page 1 showing the 2 of them on the same line in 1979 in a dead man's hand. And on the line at the bottom where a licensee may ask the office a question, I asked one. Whether an item reported in April under pledge was still redeemable, and if so, by whom. That is all I did. I did not write to the fair. I did not telephone one collector. I filed my own paperwork 4 weeks late and asked a question I was entitled to ask, and then went back to the bench and did a quarter repeat that had been in the tray since March. Iantha called 12 days later. She said, "Ma'am, I'm going to read you what's going out, because you'll get a copy anyway, and I'd rather you heard it from a person." The office had put the April report and the March bill of sale side by side. The report describes a movement number. The bill of sale describes a case number, and the factory archive gives that case number to another watch entirely. So, on the state's own file, that dealer reported taking in one object and later papered the sale of a different one. Iantha said, "It isn't fraud until somebody proves what she meant. It's a filing matter. But a filing matter with us has teeth, because the way she gets to keep buying across a counter is that we believe her forms." The office required a corrected report, in the licensee's own hand, on the public file, where every dealer in 3 counties reads it. The office put a condition on her license for 2 years. Every acquisition she reports gets checked against the maker's archive before it clears. And the office said the plain thing I had asked for. An item taken on pledge is redeemable by the person who pledged it, on payment of the sum advanced, which the report gives as $640. $640. $52,830 on the note. $640 advanced against my father's watch. That is what she moved my mother's debt by. She took a man off his own chest for $640 against $52,830, which does not shift that note 1 inch, and was never meant to. It was meant to put a hand on the back of an old woman's neck. I did not deliver one word of that. A woman I have never met read 2 forms and did her job on a Tuesday. We did it at my counter on the 2nd Friday in May at 12:30, because that is when a court clerk gets a lunch. A collections clerk is also a notary, and a notary will come to you if you ask nicely, and it is on her way. She came the 3 blocks with the thimble on her finger and a stamp in her handbag. "Is there anywhere I can put this that isn't glass?" she said. There were 4 of us and 1 customer. The customer was Gussie Westbrook, because it was the 2nd Friday and she brings her husband's steel watch on 2nd Fridays for me to wind and listen to. She sat by the window and stayed. Nobody asked her to go. My mother came at 25 past and stood at the end of the counter in her coat. My mother-in-law came at 1/2 exactly with her folder. I untied the house call roll on the glass and rolled it out flat, book at the top, forms in the middle pocket. I put a hand on either side of it, and I did not read out one word of it all afternoon. That is not restraint for its own sake. It is the trade. You do not read the numbers at a family. You put the paper where they can see it and let them look. Hildred did the reading, because it was her filing and a release has to describe the property. A clerk reads what is in front of her. She picked up the April report. She put the thimble finger on the box the width of my thumb, and in the voice of a woman reading a delivery address, she said, "Transaction type. Pledge." Then she looked up at my mother, not at me. "That's a loan, ma'am, with a thing sitting on it. It was never a sale." I have watched my mother's face my whole life, and almost never seen anything on it. She put one hand flat on the glass and said, out loud, to a woman she had never met, "I never sold his watch." And Hildred Vandergrift said, "No, ma'am. Your own paper says you didn't. It says so in the state's file." That is the whole reason I asked a stranger into my shop. My mother could not say it to me over a ham or in her own kitchen with a pan in her hand. She said it in 90 seconds to a woman with a rubber thimble on. A stranger was the one person in that room she could get it past. Gussie Westbrook, 81, got up and put her own hand flat on the glass beside my mother's and left it there. She did not say anything. She never has. My mother-in-law opened her folder and put the March bill of sale on the counter. I put my hand on it and slid it back, and I said the only thing I said to her that day. "You only kept the paper. So did the state. Let it go, Esme." It was only a watch. The only sentence in this story that was trying to protect somebody. Then Hildred Vandergrift turned that room with a clerical question. A release has to describe the property. She had a movement number off the April report and a case number off the bill of sale, and she wanted to know which went in the box. I did not answer. I opened my father's book on the oilcloth to the first page and turned it round on the counter, the way you do on a widow's kitchen table, and stepped back. 1979. Both numbers on one line, and a signature in the owner column in a hand 4 years dead. She had been counting the room all afternoon the way she counts everything, and she stopped. She has been licensed since before I was born, and she knows what she is looking at. That case has sat on that movement since the year she opened her own doors. In a book older than her license, her paper does not just say, "a wrong number." It says one, a stranger with a magnifier can check against a page nobody in this family wrote for her. I took a typed schedule out of the roll and slid it across the glass, and said nothing about that either. She read it twice, because she reads everything twice. Then she took out her own pen, signed the withdrawal, and said the only true accounting anybody did that day. A note I have to explain twice is worth less than a schedule that pays. Then we did the boring part, which is the part that lasts. The note came off the docket. That is Hildred's stamp, and it took 40 seconds, and it means my mother's rent and her account and her furniture came off a schedule they had been on since September. The debt did not go anywhere. I did not want it to. I assumed it. My name, my shop, a written schedule, notarized on my own counter by the woman with the thimble. $51,150 remaining. At a figure a month I will be paying until I am 50. It was never my mother's debt. It was the payoff quote on my father's line of credit for a shop with my name on the window, and my mother had been holding it off $40 at a time out of a pension so that I could go on believing 4 words at a funeral. Structure, not feelings. Feelings come back around at Thanksgiving. A schedule does not. My father's watch was redeemed for $640, which I paid across the glass in cash out of the shop drawer. She counted it twice, wrote a receipt, and left. There has never been an apology. I do not expect one, and would not know where to put it. She filed the corrected report. It sits on the public file with her licensee number on it, and every dealer between here and the state line has read it. 2 stopped consigning to her. In October, her fair table was in the annex by the doors instead of the front hall. Small and embarrassing is what actually happens to people. We are not fixed, my mother and I. In June, I opened the guarantee card drawer for something else and found her hold ticket, folded in half, filed by date. She had put it where a Crozier puts paper. She has never mentioned it. I have never asked. The watch came back on a Friday in a padded envelope with a receipt stapled to it, which I will be angry about long after the rest. The hands were still at 9:17. Nobody out there had thought it was worth winding. I took the back off at the bench, with the lamp down low. 4 dates. His. A 5th. Mine. From the spring after he died. I cleaned it, and oiled it, and set the beat. 9 days, off and on, because I would not let myself hurry it. Then I scratched the 6th date in beside his 4 and my 1. And my hand was steadier than the first time. Then I wound it and let it run. I never reset it. It says 9:17, and then it says 9:18. It is wrong by about 7 hours, and it always will be. It is running. I check it against the regulator every morning the way you check on somebody. A watch keeps the time it was given, not the time it is told. Here is how it goes now, and it is the only part I would put on a wall. The first Saturday of the month I open at 9 and take no repairs. Anybody may bring in a watch that belonged to somebody who is gone. I take the back off, read both numbers out loud, write them in the book with the date, and hand over the copy, no charge. Some Saturdays, 2 people, some Saturdays, 7, and we go past noon. My mother sits at the end of the counter and reads the numbers off while I write. Her eyes are better than mine at that distance. And it turns out she can find a movement number under a loop as fast as anybody I have trained. Gussie Westbrook came the first Saturday with the steel one on the canvas strap, which I had written down in November, and let me do it again anyway. And in about the 4th month, in a warm shop, without saying one word about it, my mother took her coat off and hung it on the peg by the back door, next to the house call roll. That's my story. One watch stopped at 9:17, one word in a box the width of my thumb, and $40 a month out of a check that comes on the 3rd. If somebody in your family has ever signed something for you, a lease, a loan, a paper at a kitchen table after a funeral, ask them tonight for a copy, not to check them. So, the paper is not the only one who knows. Most counties let you read the court's list at the counter for nothing. Give it the 10 minutes it takes to be told no. Share this with the woman who found out too late that her mother's silence was not guilt. Then tell me in the comments what your family calls the thing they will not explain to you, and hit subscribe. Because there is always another woman on that Friday bench, and I would like her to hear this one. That's all of it. Thank you for sitting with me on the porch tonight. I'll see you in the next one.